Hello everybody, welcome to another video. If you're new here, my name's Aaliyah and I make content mostly around trauma and abuse survival topics, but also my own personal wrestlings with God, I would say. So speaking of wrestling with God, I got a comment on one of my reels and it inspired me to make this video, and it has to do with faith. Um, this person says they keep saying to themselves and to their therapist, "You're asking me to have faith in the universe when not only do I have no evidence, I have lots of evidence to the contrary. It's hard to." And that is a very real and valid experience for so many people. And I replied with one of my favorite quotes: "Faith is the substance of things hoped for and evidence of things not seen." I said, "This makes me think how we need more discussions on how to actively choose faith, like real faith that asks us to trust what we cannot externally validate." Might make a long form video on my thoughts on this, and here I am, because this is a central pillar to how I navigate my life. Choosing faith when I have every reason under the sun not to. That's what this video is about. So if you struggle with your faith, if you are an abuse survivor, or if you are just someone feeling like you're hungry for more, maybe life on the outside looks perfectly fine. Maybe you're wonderfully grateful for everything that you have. Maybe you can appreciate the beauty in everything everywhere all around you, but something in you is calling more out of you, calling more from you, and you don't have evidence or proof that those things that you long for exist. So how on earth do you pursue them? How on earth do you choose them? This is making me emotional, which is a good thing, because this energy is very powerful, and I literally tried to film this intro probably about 5 times, but I was just falling flat, and I was like, "God, come in the room, come into me, come into this video, and like lead me through this word." And instantly I'm like, oh, that's where I'm coming from. That's the heart, that's the feeling. And the feeling that I'm connecting with is just like, I gotta pause this. Just took me a minute to get to, but it's the feeling of connecting with a sense of hope when the whole world is dark. It's like being buried underneath rocks. It's like being buried alive. I don't know what being buried alive is like, so maybe I shouldn't say that. But it's like metaphorically buried underneath dark, heavy life, and you're alive. And you have no idea how you're getting out of these rocks. You are not built with the strength to push these rocks up off of you. So what do? You surrender. And in that moment of surrender, you're faced with what you're made of. You are stripped bare naked on a soul level. And it reminds me of the old, I don't know where it comes from, Native American euphemism or quote or whatever about, how there's two wolves inside of you and they're always fighting, and the one you feed more is the one that wins. And it's such a basic but meaningful thing to remember. And in life, when we are squelched and squished like that, when we feel buried alive, when we feel consumed by pressure, we are oftentimes faced with these wolves inside of us, with the light and the dark, the light and the shadow, hope and fear, or love and fear, the devil and God, whatever, spirit, ego, dark and light, yin yang. You could put any number of labels on that polarity, on that dichotomy there. but they're all very similar in their own right. But anyway, you're in that pile, you're feeling all this pressure. And I think faith is a realm, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, that you arrive at. And it's a place that asks you, what orientation are you choosing at your core? And I think that people who are faced with more severe stakes in their life, whether it's life or death, or winning versus losing something really substantial, really important, sometimes picking familiarity or safety or necessity over unfamiliarity or gain, financial gain, new opportunities, whatever. It's like when there's lots of stakes at play and when life looks unknown going forward, I think that when we're at these crossroads and transitions in life, I'm just feeling like Holy Spirit energy right now. I get so in my heart when I like just feel like I'm channeling these messages, and I just feel so much gratitude for the messages coming through. So every now and again I'll have a moment of just like, woo, I feel that. I feel the words coming through. I love speaking. I love speaking for, I'm just gonna call it the Holy Spirit, God, I love it just fills me so much. Anyway, when people are at these crossroads in life, I think that that's often when people experience the most sense of like confrontation with their inner value systems, beliefs, and really their faith, because it's like faith kind of doesn't really show all the time. It doesn't really show all the time until it's tested. And when you're in a crossroads in life, when you're in a tough position and you kind of have nowhere to lean but on God, on trust, on faith of some sort, and when you finally surrender and lean back, it's one of the scariest things because, well, it's one of the scariest things when you don't know where your faith is and you don't know how to sustain your faith. So instead of surrendering and giving it to God, you might try to hold that struggle with your own willpower. And all that does is it just makes you feel like you gotta fight. It makes you feel like it's you against the world. And I know that people in that space are probably not going to hear that message because they don't have the resources that they need to surrender, to feel faith, because sometimes surrender costs death. Really, it does. Like death. It costs death. It costs. When I say death, I don't mean necessarily literal physical death, but surrendering to your faith, when it comes down to it, the matter of faith at a core level, a lot of the time surrendering to like true undying faith, like solid faith, asks for you to literally lay down your life, hand it over to something beyond you. This could look like ego death. This could look like near-death experience, or this could look like a change or a moment or a transition or a juxtaposition so drastic that it leaves no room for any of your preconceptions to go to, if that makes sense. There's no room for your old life. There's no room for anything familiar. You can either fight the inevitable, which is change and the unknown. You can wrestle with it as much as you want, or you can surrender to it and discover what's there. And I think the discovery part is really it asks, I think, us to grieve, because surrendering to faith means acknowledging that that long held dream of yours, the person that you loved that you wanted to be with, the life of something or someone that you cared about that you wanted there, but they're no longer there. Maybe it's your health, maybe it's a skill or a gift or something very dear to you. Sometimes discovering faith asks us to grieve. I'm really feeling this real big right now. Sometimes it asks us to grieve the things that our faith alone had no power over. My faith has no power over the life of my cat and her health. Well, that's debatable, and there's a lot of nuance in that, because I do believe that faith and intuition play an immensely irreplaceable role in literally everything. Like, the difference between life and death could be following your intuition, it could be having faith, depending on where that leads you in your life. So I'll just say that with a grain of salt. But ultimately, sometimes no matter how hard you pray or how hard you cry out to God, something that you love changes or gets lost. And that's when faith becomes a new question you've never had before that you don't know how to answer. And that's where this new dichotomy comes up of crippling grief and profound potential at the same time. And that dichotomy, I think, is reflected in, I don't know what part of like the Torah or the Bible that this is from, but it's like, how many times have you heard this? God is closest to the brokenhearted, or whatever. Another way of putting it, I think, is the cracks are where the light gets in. And it's commonly understood, I think, on a personal unconscious level, maybe conscious level too for some people, and also a spiritually systemic level. I mean, I'm Jewish, and this is even honored in some parts of Judaism when it comes to our grieving rituals. We sit Shiva. So when we sit Shiva, one of the traditions is to not play any music for a whole week during the grieving period, and to sit low to the ground, and to cover mirrors with sheets and stuff. And those rituals all reflect the powerful symbolic reality of these quotes that I just said. God is closest to the brokenhearted. The cracks are where the light gets in. The reason that we're guided not to listen to music is because music cuts straight through to the soul. But when you are grieving, your soul is already cut open. So music just creates more unnecessary pain, because beauty is painful when it's too big. You know what I mean? You know, when you saw that spot in nature, or that you or that sunset, or you had that moment in nature where you were just awestruck and almost brought to your knees and filled with reverence, so heavy, and so the beauty was so overbearing, overwhelming, that it just tore you open, and you had like you were just weak with awe and reverence. And that is the power of music. And so at least how it was taught to me, in the way that I understand it, that's why music is not allowed during the grieving process, because it's just too powerful. Yeah. I'm sure there's a better explanation on that, and I could consult I have my Jewish books behind me right there. but I'm not going to go digging through them right now. But anyway, and then with the mirrors thing, I think that the mirrors thing is it like encourages you to stay in the kind of spiritual, emotional, metaphysical realm, to really be present with that grief and with the spirit of the grief process, because the mirror reflects the physical material world. And I think there's another layer to it too as well, where um, something about like the spirit, you don't want the spirit to kind of be confused and look in the mirror and not see themselves, because that could be disorienting for a spirit transitioning. I think that was another thing that I've heard, but I don't know. um I don't know what other Jews commonly how other Jews commonly interpret the mirror thing, but that's what I've learned, and it makes sense to me. um and I think a lot of personal religious beliefs come from personal experience anyway. I mean, literally, the word Israel, the name Israel, means to wrestle with God, and that's what I feel so proud of about being a Jew, is that I have this freedom to have open discourse, to argue, to wrestle, to use my voice, and to explore reality from my eyes and have that be valid in the lens of Judaism, like pure, good, real Judaism. Like, if someone tries to use religion or Judaism as a weapon, then it's not even about Judaism or the religion, it's about their ego. And unfortunately, so many people's egos abuse religion, but I have not had that experience. I didn't grow up with that experience, thankfully, and I'm very Judaism and God and all of this are extremely, extremely valuable, important, intimate, close, dear, like components to my life. And so, in a lot of my videos, I like to share Jewish wisdom. And despite the fact that I'm estranged from my family, sadly, that was one of the joys of being brought up with them. And it's weird how this dichotomy can exist of, you know, like something so wonderful and substantial in life can coexist next to something so life threatening. It's really bizarre just to grow up or have experienced circumstances where the contrast is just so severe. It can be a little even disassociating at times, but I've learned to be present with polarity, because of that, which is a good thing, something I appreciate. But anyway, faith. How do we have faith? How do we have faith when, for example, we want to find a better relationship than what we grew up with or what we have only ever known? What does that actually ask of us? I think it asks many things, and please add to the conversation on this, but one of the things that it asks, I think this is so basic, and this was the reel that I posted on Instagram. It was basically going off this concept, but one of the things that having faith asks us is to be willing to pay the price of it, which a lot of the time can be loneliness or these kind of types of discomfort that touch really, really close to the core of what triggers our deepest survival instincts. And I've just seen this over and over. You know what it is? Here's a good analogy. Sorry about the knuckle cracking, if you care. I saw an Instagram reel once upon a time. It was an animation. And it was an animation of this like suburban street and these grass lawn sections on the street, like lining the sidewalk. And one grass lawn had sprinklers watering it all the time, and the other one was like dead and brown. And on the dead and brown one, there was a dandelion who was like drying out, and he was on his way to die. And on the green grass, it was getting watered. All these dandelions were, well, I don't think there were dandelions on it yet, but it was getting abundant water. So the dandelion, who was dry and crispy, literally decided to pluck his roots up off the earth and bravely jump onto that sidewalk pavement, run across the sidewalk, and aim to get to the wet grass, the nourished grass, the grass that could sustain its life, because it was going to die there on the dirt, on the dry dirt. Um, but it was really devastating and just so real. This little metaphor here. So the dandelion picked up its roots off the ground, which is obviously symbolic of leaving behind familiarity, habits, things you're accustomed to, familiar environments, familiar relationships, literally leaving behind your roots, uprooting yourself. Excuse me. And then it started to walk across the pavement, the sidewalk, which was scalding hot, and it depicted its little root feet. Every time it took a step, its root feet would just let off this steam, and it would suck more water and moisture out of this already dying dandelion. But he kept running across the sidewalk to the greener patch of grass. And then, right before he gets to the grass, he takes one last step, and he falls over and he dies. But when he dies, he's like an inch away from the grass. When he dies, all of his little petals turn into dandelion seeds. And those seeds scatter in the breeze, and they land, excuse me. Sorry. They land on the grass, and in time, all of his seeds grow into a new generation of dandelions. And I thought it was so beautiful because it's such a realistic depiction of what it looks like to have faith, because that dandelion had to lean on his faith. He couldn't lean on certainty, whether or not he was going to get to the green patch of grass. He couldn't lean on his own body, his own flesh, his own health. He barely had it. He was hanging on. He couldn't lean on the availability of moisture, resources, food. He was crispy. He was shriveling. He was getting the moisture absorbed right out of him. He couldn't lean on anything he knew. He couldn't lean on his roots being, even being able to get him across the sidewalk, like, definitely. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, faith, he chose faith because he saw these two possible pathways that his life could take. He was at this major threshold where the meaning of his very life was being measured by his current circumstances. And in that moment, he chose faith. Faith is not something that he had to be leaning on all that time when he was just a little seed and growing in soil that was sustaining his growth up until that point when it started drying out. But the reason I say that is because faith oftentimes doesn't really get tested until it's time to choose, right? So choosing faith is really powerful, and it kind of can make you grow exponentially in ways that you never anticipated. Let's say that, literally and emotionally, metaphorically, whatever, literally in the sense that this dandelion chose faith and he literally grew an entire new generation, which is really powerful symbolism in its own right. Like, we leave legacies, whether we want to or not, whether we choose it or not, whether anyone ever remembers our name again or not. We are leaving a legacy on this earth. But yeah, so this dandelion, obviously he sadly died. Rest in peace. He sadly died before he got a chance to cognitively integrate what that faith was actually asking of him or her, whatever. I just think him because of all the seeds that spread everywhere, you know. But yeah, when another really powerful and important part of this conversation I want to have about choosing faith is, what does faith actually ask of us? How can we measure that? How can we quantify or qualify that and provide supportive resources for people who want to choose faith actively? Because no, just believe is not good enough for me, because that doesn't work. Just believe? What the hell does that mean? Just believe? Like, I'm sorry, but there's a difference between just believing, making a choice, and thinking a thought, and actually embodying it. You cannot expect someone to know how to embody. Just believe. Without context, without experience, whether they already have the experience to know how to just believe, or whether they're going to be taught. But like, just believe, that's not adequate instructions. If we were signing up for a course on how to have faith, and you paid all this money to learn to learn tools to how to have faith, to practice them in a group, and someone told you just believe and that was it, and then you just walked out, I'd be like, I want a fucking refund. I'm going to blast this stupid organization's name on the internet because they sold me a lie. They sold me like a pretty package dressed in empty instructions. I think my point has gotten across. What I'm trying to say is that there is a massive, massive, massive need, I think, on the planet in general for practical application, practical discussions around how do we apply faith, because faith is not woo-woo at all. It is lived, it is real, it is a process. Oh my God. So back to what I was saying, this little dandelion didn't get to integrate what that faith was actually asking of his body, his mind, his thinking process, his emotions, his nervous system, his organs, like all the layers of how faith was acting through this dandelion's body, mind, heart, spirit. That's what I'm talking about here. How does faith impact and interact with us on every level of our being? Body, mind, spirit, emotions, thoughts, all of this stuff. How does faith metabolize through my nervous system? How does faith work in my thinking? How does faith work in the way that I emotionally feel, in the way that I process emotions? How does faith have an impact on my physical body? How does faith impact my sense of safety, surrender, ease, peace, security, and survival, fear, parasympathetic activation? And how can I support these systems when I am acting in faith? I think if people had more practical resources, tools, supports, frameworks, systems for how to enact faith, faith would be a lot more enticing for a lot of people. And of course, some people would take that wisdom and run with it and turn it into a performance, which is not what I'm talking about. No. I don't know if there's ever going to be I think there will be a time in history, maybe in God knows how many thousands or millions of years or whatever, where people stop faking and performing. But as long as I'm alive, I don't foresee some people on Earth completely throwing away their masks and just being real for once. Sad as that is to say. But I think that in in conversations regarding growth and evolution in general, I think there's this maybe unconscious motivation in some people who are really just, I don't know what it even is, but I think that a lot of people act performative, especially in spiritual spheres. They posture heavily because they um, want, it's like they're surviving. That's what they think is the right thing to do unconsciously. They posture and they want to almost like fool themselves or project this image out into the world of themselves as successful, or you know, masters of the, you know, the pain, the hardship, because they don't want to deal with the pain and the hardship. They want to put on a performance and pretend that they're over it. But that's just going to come back to bite them in the face. Um, so, I mean, joke's on them. God bless them. But anyway, yeah. So, anyway, for the people who are like honest with themselves, because it's not a competition, you don't owe anyone a mask. You don't owe anyone a performance. The only thing that you owe is just, I would say, your presence to yourself, because that's a gift, you know? That's love. You just owe yourself love, um, I think. And that's not something anyone can take away from you. That love inside your own heart, it's always there. Um, and it's even harder to find when the world projects onto you and obscures that image, and sometimes it's like a constant daily battle. Anyway, faith, what does it ask of us? So I think I'm just going to leave that open ended for now because I'm getting kind of tired. I don't want to make this too long. Please feel free to continue the conversation. I think that I said some really good stuff in here, and I hope that someone can hear this and run with it. And yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. Okay, thanks for watching this. Let me know if it helped, and I'll see you next time.